Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. We are coming off of a week where we implemented cutscenes. We put basically our intro cutscene together and it looked pretty darn snappy. I was very happy with it. I thought it was really exciting to see all of that coming together. And at the very end of last week on Friday in the Q&A, I think it might have been Miblo that asked the question, can we fade out the desktop? And I was sort of throwing together really quickly a way to make that happen, but I didn't have time to actually do it. So what I was thinking we might do today is just quickly take a look at that and see if I can get that working for him. It's not something we will do for Handmade Hero, but it's just, you know, it's a reasonable question. And it seems like the least we can do for someone who spent so much time making a great episode guide for Handmade Hero. So let's take a look. Today is day 225, so if you pre-ordered the game, on handmadehero.org and downloaded the source code, you want to start with day 224 source code. That's where I'm starting today. Let's go ahead and bring that up here and see what we can do. All right, so here we are. I believe we were in Win32 Handmade, so that's right here. What we did is we had a little fade out function I was going to hack together. And again, I'm not trying to do a super industrial strength grid in this. I just want to kind of show what the idea was. Now, Martins Mosaico, who often answers questions on the forums, he reminded me on Twitter that I already covered how to do this a little more simply earlier on. And I forgot about it entirely, but that's true. Instead of using update layered window, we can actually use the set layered window parameters. If you remember way back, I showed how to do this. Let me look it up here. It's like, yeah, set layered window attributes. This one here. I showed how to use this, completely forgot about the function. My brain's old. I don't use these functions very often anymore, so I was just like, poof. Apparently I knew it earlier on, but fortunately Martins was there to remember. So thank you very much for that, among other things. Thank you for basically answering everyone's questions on the forums all the time, which is actually what Martins often does. So anyway, let's take a look at this guy, and I'm going to see if I can hack this together. Now remember, what we did is we wanted to fade out the background, and what I said might be the most compatible way to do it, because there's different ways you could do it, but I think maybe the most compatible way to probably do it would be just create a full screen window that's transparent but black, and then gradually increase its opacity until the point where we can actually see it blot out the background. So I'm going to try that. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm just going to try that here to see if that gives us a reasonable effect, and then we can go from there. So I'm going to skip this part. Hopefully we don't have to do it. Again, I'm not sure. We may or may not. I'm going to try using set layered window and see what I can do. So there's our blend function and all that sort of thing. I'm going to call set layered window. You can see that what it has here is it takes the H-wind, right? And that H-wind we already know is the one that we just created for this specific purpose, right? Then we've got a CR key, which is the color key. Now, presumably that's not necessary because, again, that's not going to be in our alpha function. This blend function is presumably not going to actually need that because you can see we can specify it right here. So we're going to do LWA alpha instead of LWA color key, right? So I'm going to grab that out, LWA alpha, and oops, that's no good. And then I just need to specify these this byte alpha value here. So this color ref, I think, like before, is just can be anything. And so really all we need to do is specify that byte, and we'll see how that goes. Okay. And I'm going to sleep for less time there. Okay, so what I want to do here, this alpha value that we specify, it's used to describe the opacity, right? So when it's 0, it's transparent. When it's 255, it's opaque. So what I should be able to do is just set it to whatever we're setting the alpha value here to. And hopefully that will do something resembling something. I don't actually know if it will, but we're going to find out. So let's see what we get here. And if that, that's... I guess I still have the debugger running or something here. Let's go ahead and fix that. Let's see. Yeah, gotta actually cast that to a byte. There we go. Okay. So yeah, that looks exactly what I would have expected. So thank you, Martins, for reminding me. That saved us a ton of time. So yeah, so this should do the fade out now, I suspect, right? Although that, I suppose, was a little too fast. I admit that. So we need a little bit. Let's do a sleep 1 here. There we go. So that's a fade out for you. And so all we really need to do now, in order to sort of have that fade work a little more appropriately, is we're going to want to, like this sleep, right? This is not really a reasonable way to do timing, right? Because it's very variable. It's not a guaranteed amount of time. You know, we can't just put something in there and say, oh, I want this at 60 frames a second, so do sleep 16. You know, that doesn't necessarily guarantee the proper amount of time, right? That might be how fast it is on this machine. It might be totally different on some other machine. It's just all kind of, it's just not what we want, right? So what we would want to do here, if we were going to try and make this fade out be a little bit more reasonable, right, is we might want to make it so that this fade out routine is something that we could call incrementally as we sort of go through our game loop, or who knows what else we're doing, and have that fade out happen sort of like on our main clock, in our main kind of timing, you know, basically tie it to something a little more real, if that makes sense. And so we can do that. That's actually not that hard. And maybe, you know, if you want, I can do that now, since you guys asked, you know, let's take a look. So if we wanted to do that, what we would do is we would probably just make this window here that we've got, we'd probably make this a more permanent installation to our game. So for example, in here, you know, we do this registering of the window class. What we would probably do is we'd register a second window class like we did here and create a second window, and we do that entirely permanently, right? So we do something like, you know, before we did this stuff, before we did any of this stuff, you know, right after we sort of, I suppose, do some of these things for startup, we would probably create that window. Now, I'm just thinking, do I want to try to capture that stuff? I don't think so. So what I'm going to do here is, I think I'm just going to do a thing here where we just kind of do hwind our fade window, right? And our fade window is going to be handled this way. So here's all of that stuff that happens in here. And that's going to do this registration. It's going to do all the stuff that it needs to do. It's going to make it full screen, but it's not going to do any of that. It's just going to make it full screen, and then it's going to stop. And then everything else we'll do separately from that, right? Okay. So starting with that, we would then change this function to be like, all right, what's the fade window? And what's the actual value that we're trying to fade to? Okay. And I'm going to say that we're going to pass it like some kind of an R32, which is the opacity, something like this. Or I could just call it the alpha value, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and convert that down, right? So I would do something like say, okay, the alpha value times 255, and then I would want to convert that down to a byte after we were done to sort of get that value into place. So this is the this is the Windows alpha value, something like this. So that would be what we would pass. We would no longer use this loop at all. And then what I do is when we find out what the window alpha actually is, I'd probably do something like say, oh, okay, you know, if the alpha value is 0, then I want to hide the window. Otherwise, I want to show the window. Like that. Something like this. Okay. So then, what I could do, at least in theory, or like, I guess I could say set fade alpha or something like this, right? So if I run this now, and let's just go like that. If I run this now, what we should see is that like absolutely nothing actually happens, right? Because we haven't sort of tied it into anything. So it's not going to do anything, obviously. But we'll take care of that in 1 second. So, you know, I run this thing now, and we basically just get the app exactly the way that we had it before. There's no fade, there's no nothing, right? But what I can do now is I can say, all right, like when we're going to go start this, start the party here, right? When we do our like global running situation or whatever else we're doing, which happens right here. right? What I could do is do something like, you know, our fade alpha is going to equal 0, 0, or something like that. And as we come through here, what we could do is say the fade alpha, that's got to go like up to 1.0 before we do like anything else, right? Before like anything else happens, we've got to make sure that happens, right? So as we do that, what I could do is say, okay, you know, we've got this sort of, this thing here that does our show window. Oops. Here it is. So you can see here, like we do our toggle window and we do our show window on our main window. What I could do there is say like, let's not do that. Let's not show the main window yet. Let's withhold that for later. And so if I do that right now, when we run the game, we won't see anything. Now the game's still running in the background, we just won't see anything, right? We won't see the game at all. And so what I could do instead is I can withhold that show window, like prevent our window from actually being shown until we finish that actual fade out, right? And so what I can do is at the top of global running, for example, when we figure out our target amount per frame, I could do a thing here which basically says, okay, let's take that fade alpha value, let's go ahead and take whatever the DT for the frame actually was. We'll do like sort of an accumulation there on it, right? And we'll do something like, okay, if fade alpha is less than 0, I'm going to clamp it actually. I don't know if clamp's in here, so I'm going to do the clamp manually. So I'm going to do if fade alpha is less than 0, 0, fade alpha equals 0, 0, and if fade alpha is greater than 1.0, fade alpha equals 1.0. Now we have functions to do that in our math library, but I don't remember if we include the math library in the Win32 section. Probably we don't. I don't really remember. Anyway. So we've got our fade alpha there, and what I want to do is say, okay, we've got the fade alpha. We're going to go ahead and update the fade alpha every time, right? But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say, all right, if the fade alpha equals 1.0, then at that point, I know that I can transition over to the other window. I know that like once we've gotten up to that opacity, I can transition over to the other window. So what I would do at that time is I'm going to call that setFadeAlpha function, and I'm going to call it to basically turn off the window entirely. Right, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And I'm going to show our other window so that we'll see our other window instead. So once the fade alpha hits that, I'm going to do it. Otherwise, if the fade alpha hasn't hit that, I'm going to like continue to let it go up, right? Something like this. So I'm just going to make the fade alpha kind of go up until it's completely opaque, and then I'm going to switch to the other window, and at that point we can see the game. Does that make sense? And now we're on a proper timer as well, so hopefully that will be fine. What's going on here? Yeah, so this guy should be like nothing. Should be equal to nothing. Okay. And so that was spectacularly bad, right? I admit that. That was not what I expected to look at all. It should have looked much smoother than that. But what are you going to do? Sometimes you mess it up. Yeah, I can't say I immediately know why that happened, but we will step into it and find out. Am I wrong? That seemed really abrupt, right? You saw it, didn't you? Yeah, that seemed really abrupt. I don't feel like we should have been going that fast, although maybe, for all I know, we actually were. So yeah, that could be true. What we probably would need to do is actually see what the actual time per frame was, or turn back on our actual loop of timing. So I'm gonna maybe I'll do that just temporarily so that we have a more sustainable timing loop in here to see. All right, there we go. So that's actually quite a bit better. So yeah, we're gonna have to fix our frame rate either way to make ourselves get back to a solid 30 hertz or 60 hertz with, you know, with actual real timing in there. What I don't know is we're getting a little bit of a flicker there, so I think that is not what we want. So there's a little bit of a problem when we hit fade alpha 1. This part obviously is not quite working yet, and I'm not, like, it's the handoff is not quite looking like I feel like it should. Because you can see, and maybe it's too hard to see on the stream at home, and that time it didn't happen. There it is. You see a brief flash sometimes in the changeover period, And so I don't know, I don't know if we need to like force an update of the window or something in order to get that to work properly or something like this. I'm not quite sure. So I'm not sure what's actually happening there. Or if maybe we're going over our limit or something. I don't know. I'm gonna step in just real briefly to see, just to make sure that's all working properly and make sure that it's just a Windows thing so that we know that that's the problem we're trying to solve, if that makes sense. Oh, of course, now there's a full screen window that I can't get past. Great. Great. Well, in order to debug that, that's not such a bad thing. I can just take off the topmost flag there. The reason I couldn't see that window, right, is because we made a window that's called topmost. It's on top of all the other windows, so I couldn't alt-tab to the debugger. One of the reasons it's nice to have a second monitor, to say the least, right? All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can make this happen again. So there we go. Let's set the breakpoint. I don't know why Windows didn't want to set the breakpoint before. So there we go. Now we're at show window. So what I'm going to do is, this obviously should show the window. I don't think there's anything weird happening there, but I want to see what happens in fade window. What's the Windows alpha value here? It's 0. So it's going to call SW hide on that window, which is exactly what I wanted. I'm going to also step in to see if that ever happened before that. So meaning, did we ever try to hide the window before we got to that point? I just want to make sure that that didn't happen. And it didn't, right? That's the first time that we ever hit that case. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm not really sure what the problem is there. I guess one thing I should say is, after we do this once, we don't want to keep doing this again. So I do wonder if maybe that's causing a little bit of a problem. So I may also try to remove that from happening. So I'm going to just do a thing that's like, something like, fading complete or something. And I'll do, or like, maybe a fade in progress. Well, no, I'll do fading complete. So what I'll do here is, like, if the fading is not complete, we do all this stuff. Otherwise, we don't do anything. So it's something like that. And so I don't know if that'll help. Like I said, it doesn't. I didn't think it would, but I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any kind of glitching happening there, just to be sure. So all right, so we've got a little bit of a glitch there, and I'm not exactly sure quite what it comes from. Like I said, I don't know if what we need to do is like prime this thing a little bit more. So we do like a show window like this, like for example, I guess I should check to see if we get a glitch just doing this. I don't think we should, because I believe that topmost window should say topmost, right? And so that looks pretty good there. Let me run it again, because it didn't always do it. So I just want to make sure. Okay. So it's basically just, for some reason, when we disappear, when that window goes away, we're not getting our other window like up there in time. And so I don't know if we need to go through one round of the message loop or something to try and make sure that we've repainted it. There's some things I could maybe do here. I'm not really sure. You know what I could do? I think our toggle full screen, I could do something like this potentially, and I'm not totally sure, but let me just take a look. Let's see what happens if we do a toggle full screen after showing it to force that repaint. I just want to see if that gives us any better success. Nah, that's even worse. We get all kinds of weird stuff happening there. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a show window, I'm going to do an update window, and I'm going to force a repaint. I'm just going to force Windows to, or I'm going to try to force Windows to repaint. And the way I'm going to do that is going to call a function called invalidateRect. And what this does is it basically says, hey, I want you to sort of paint this window, right? And we'll see if that's any good here. So basically what this says is, all right, I want you to take a window. And I feel like this should have just been being done. So again, I don't really have high hopes for this, but with Windows programming, there's no way to really know. You can't step through the code. So unless you're Raymond Chen and can step through the code, it's pretty hard to find out why Windows does whatever random stupid thing it is that it does. So I'm going to go ahead and force it to repaint there. I'm going to call update window to try and make that paint happen. And I don't know if that'll help, but I'm going to try, right? So let's take a look and see what happens. Invalidate rect. There we go. And we'll see if that gives us any more success on the glitch. Still nothing. So again, I really just don't know where that's coming from. It's at the changeover point to be sure, but I just can't tell why we're getting that. I guess I should also verify again that there's no weirdness with the alpha values. Like that this alpha value doesn't wrap or something like that. I can't see how it would because that doesn't really make any sense. But let me see. Let me just make sure that it doesn't. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace Windows Alpha with 255. This way we're black the whole time. Just straight up black. We come on black, we stay black, and I want to see if there's any glitching when that happens. I just want to see, right? So I'm going to run that a couple times and see if we ever get the glitch. So the fact that we don't get the glitch there is making me think that maybe we're wrapping... Oh, nope, there was the glitch. So even if all we do... Yeah, there's the glitch again. So even if all we do is just call it with black, it still happens. So what that says to me is that we're not like screwing up the calculation and accidentally passing 0 at the end a little bit early or something like that. So yeah, so that's good. What I also could do here is have I could have set layered window attributes. Actually, it's calling SWShow every time, and that's not really necessary. So I could also do something like where we are a little bit saner about that sort of thing. I could do where we don't actually call, where we don't actually call that. And that would look something more like this. Right? Show window SW show. This could happen only if the window is not visible. And I don't really remember how you actually do that. I don't think there is an is visible call, but maybe there is. I guess there is. All right, perfect. Is window visible? So what we can do is just say like, okay, if the window is visible, show it. If the window is visible, hide it. If it's not visible, show it in either of the two cases, right? Excuse me. All right, so let's see if that does any better. Again, same thing. So it's a little bit cleaner now, but doesn't actually help with our main problem. And again, like I said, this is really kind of annoying. This is exactly the kind of debugging that I don't recommend people do with their own code, because with your own code, you should just step through and find the actual problem. The super annoying part about Windows is you can't, right? You can't step in and figure out what's wrong because it's someone else's code and it's proprietary and you can't see it. So hey, that's why a lot of Windows things are buggy, is because when you write stuff, you don't actually have any idea what's actually going on. You have no idea what the bugs could be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I don't know what else to do here. I'm going to try delaying for 1 frame. I'm going to do another thing that's like, again, just making kind of a little mini finite state machine here just to see if it changes. This is pure experimentation, like I said before. So we'll do if fading complete, and then we'll do if not showing complete. So this will give us 1 pass through the message loop to see if that does anything. I don't know that it will. But we'll just see if it does, right? So there's our fading complete. If not showing complete, then what I'll do is I will do this part, right? So we're going to try and get that other window up first and see, and then we'll give it 1 pass through the Windows loop. So it didn't do it that time, but again, it seems to only do it once in a while, so I just want to test to see and make sure that that's actually solving it. It does look like giving it 1 pass through the message loop maybe gave it time to do the repaint and like actually process the paint message, which might have been the problem. Again, I don't know. I'm not saying that's actually what it is, but it does look like now we've solved that problem, which is kind of nice. So that's good. Now what I would like to do is that cursor is still visible. Not a huge fan of the cursor being visible. So what I might do is just as a final touch here, again, we've kind of have our window proc, right? if you remember, how did we make the cursor disappear, right? How did we do that originally? Well, the way that we did that is here in our window callback for our main window is when it asked us to set the cursor, we said shut it off. Don't show the cursor, like get rid of that cursor. And so what I might do here is have a Win32 fade window callback. That's our own callback. Again, it doesn't handle any messages at all for the most part. It's just going to, and in fact, it might actually be resistant to close and destroy so that people basically can't get rid of it, if that makes sense. It'll just say like, hey, I don't care what you think you're doing. We are going to like full on ignore you. I guess destroy probably you don't want to do, but close certainly we could just say like, hey man, I don't care if you think you're closing me. You ain't closing me. I got news for you, pal. That's just how this goes. So we could definitely do something like that. And then in here, what we would have is when we call the fade window callback, right? The close doesn't do anything. The set cursor is definitely going to just shut it down and say, you know what? Don't ever show that cursor. So then what we do is when we have def window proc, which we have, which is what we set the fade window to call, right? Here, we could just call our new function, which will get rid of that cursor. That way, the instant you hit F5, the cursor goes away and the fade out happens there. Now, I don't know whether there's any way to fade out the cursor, right? I never tried something like that before. We could certainly investigate and see. But I also want to see here, so we do have a problem, which is that that window that's that topmost window there. We want that to go away entirely. And you can see that it's still kind of there. I don't really know why, because I feel like SW hide should have gotten rid of that. That should have gotten rid of it. But you know what I think? I think I may have passed the wrong flag there. I want to say that I passed the wrong flag there. I don't know that I did. I'm just going to look and see. Let's take a look. Let's see. No, there it is. So why you can still pick it, I'm not sure. If the window is visible, hide the window. That's what should have happened on alpha 0. Right? And it's a topmost window, so we shouldn't even have seen our window. So that's pretty weird. I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint there to make sure that's getting called. Right? And it's not getting called. Okay. Ah. Well, no, that should still return the right thing, right? Huh. So is window visible apparently returns false for layered windows? Not sure I know why that would be. I'm going to go ahead and see what SPY++ has to say about that. Again, using the SPY tool, which is basically lets you inspect windows on Microsoft Windows. I'm just going to go ahead and look and see what's actually happening there. I want to look and see if this window is marked visible or not. So I'm going to go into the styles, and I'm going to see. So it does not have the visible style set, which is weird because it definitely is visible. Like we were seeing it at that time, and I don't really understand how it went away. So I'm going to actually set a breakpoint like earlier on in this process. So let's go ahead and let it fade out a little bit, right? And so here we are with an alpha value of 0.6. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, like, what's the visible value here, right? So let's go ahead and let's refresh that. I'm going to look at the Handmade here. I'll fade out window class, take a look at the properties there, and go ahead and look at the styles. There's that visible flag right there, right? And so I'm not sure how does it get set to invisible without us ever calling hide. Does someone want to give me a little primer on that situation? Because I don't get it. Did I forget like something in here? Did I leave something in there? Did I? show window, window show, validate rect, fade incomplete, set fade alpha. Yeah, I mean, we don't touch that window in any other place. So, all right, so tell me why, Mr. Thingy. Tell me why. And that time we didn't ever even hit this case. Am I going crazy here, people? What's going on? What's going on? The alpha is 0. Oh, the first time we call it, though. So the very first time we call it, it does have alpha 0. So this time through, it's not visible, and that's fine. The next time through, it just never gets called. Why does it never get called? Why does it never get called with alpha 0? It's supposed to. So it's actually just a bug out here where I'm like, set fade alpha 0, if not showing complete. Oh, duh. Wow. That was some pretty great programming there, Casey. Nice job. Parentheses, you're fired. So obviously this is just stupid. This would be calling this all the time, which doesn't even make any sense. That's not what I intended at all. What I wanted to do was probably say this. If fading complete, right? If the fading is complete, then look to see if the showing is not complete. If it is, then go ahead and set that, right? If it's not, then get rid of that window, right? So this may bring back our bug because it may be that we never actually got rid of it. Yeah. So that's good. This is not good. This is bad news bears, right? Because this means we'll probably get our glitch back. I don't know if we will or not, but I feel like that's entirely possible. Well, so good so far. All right, so that's not bad. That's actually not bad. So let's just see now if we successfully got rid of that window, which is what I actually wanted. So now that's good. So now we don't see that window ever, which is what we wanted. And so I think we're in good shape now, right? I think we're in good shape. That's pretty decent. I think everyone's happy and everyone's smiling. So I think the other thing we could do, right, if we wanted to, is we could do the reverse process, right? We could go the other direction, if that makes sense. So what I could do is do something like defade alpha, and I could make that be something that as we go through the process, we just say, oh, okay, we're going to do defade alpha times this. So initially, what we're doing is we're fading in, and so that as we do this, the clamp still works properly, all this sort of stuff happens. And so when the fade's complete and the showing is not complete, instead of set fade alpha to 0, 0 and the showing complete thing, actually I think that's probably all fine actually now that I think about it. That's all good. Yeah, and so we could also do a thing that's like new global running or like quit on fade equals false, right? I could also do something to say like if quit on fade, then global running equals false or something like that. I don't actually know. No idea. Just giving you what the idea is there. This is kind of just janky code, but it's okay. It's in the platform layer, whatever. So anyway, so anyway, we could do something like that, and then that way we could sort of do something where we're like, okay, we set all that stuff up, and it does the thing that it does, or whatever. I don't even know. So this stuff is like, okay, when we come in here, if the fade alpha is 1.0, that means this is the end of the fade or the beginning of the fade, one or the other. So what we need to do is we need to know whether we're on the quit on fade or not, right? If we're on the quit on fade, then we're fading back into the desktop. If otherwise, we're doing the path that we already did, right? So what we would want to do here is go, all right, if we're going to quit on fade, then what we need to do is bring that alpha window back up to speed, right? So we need to do like, okay, do the set fade alpha. That set fade alpha has to, how's this going to work exactly? That set fade alpha is going to have to be set to 0 to start, right? Because we don't want, is we're going to have to set to 1.0. Yeah. So by default, if the fade alpha is 1.0, then if we're quitting on fade, we have to do that. And we want to set the D alpha. Yeah, we would want to like, well, that's really all we would have to do. We just have to make sure that we actually do this step, right? Yeah, so I think that's okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. That should be fine. And that'll let us go down to 0, and then when we get to 0, right, we should be fine. So here we'd say something like if fade alpha equals 0, 0, right, at that point, then we're going to say like, okay, that's the end of this fade, so fading complete is going to be equal to true at that point. And yeah, and that's all we really need to do. So I think that's sufficient, maybe. We got some more work to do, but I think that's sufficient. So then what we would do is say, okay, when the game requests a quit, right? Then what we would do is we'll show our window we'd get rid of, right? And then we'd set our D fade alpha equal to negative 1.0, so it's going to go backwards, right? It's gonna go from full black down, right? We know our fade alpha should already be 1.0, so that's fine. And we want our quit on fade to become true. So we know like you're going to quit on true. And then instead of quitting, we won't quite quit, not at least right away, right? And so, yeah, that's roughly what we want. All right, so we got to make all this stuff work now. Let's see where we're at. So when we come in here, we'd say the D fade alpha is 1.0, the fade alpha is 0. So we come in here, we'd say, okay, if fade alpha is, oh right, this has to be if quit on fade. This is only the quit on fade. Quit on fade and fade alpha. There we go. That's what we want. Then it would be complete. Let's see what happens there. So there's our fade out. Here is our game, ostensibly. And then if I quit this, well, that didn't work at all. So that's fine. It's great. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't let anyone tell you that was a problem. It was exactly what I wanted. You know, just like, let's just let it happen. It's totally fine. So let's go over here and see what happens here. Game memory quit requested. We do want our window to go away, and then we want our fade window to come up. So we probably actually here also want to do something like set window or set fade alpha. Maybe this. Maybe, how do I want to do this actually? Let me just jump back here. I'm gonna put this over here. So yeah, in here, okay, so that's what we need to do. We need to go fading complete equals false, showing complete equals false. That might be fine. And this, I think, probably wants to happen up here as well. So when this happens, we want to first get our fade alpha on, then we want to do our hide our main window, something like that. Right? Well, that was anticlimactic. This code is too stringy at this point. I kind of want to pull this out into something a little bit more good, if that makes sense. So I might just do this. I feel like at this point, we're sort of in for a penny, in for a pound. I don't really know where that comes from. But, you know, probably some kind of British thing, because if there's pennies and pounds involved, I'm not sure how many other places that could be, other than British currency. So let's just assume that that was the case, you know, and say, like, that's just how it goes sometimes. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, all right, cool. In here, we've got all our Win32 stuff. I'm going to straight up be like, hey, you know what? We've got a Win32 fade window. Right? And that's just the thing. Here's the handle to the window. Here's the fade alpha. And here's like the state or something. Something like that, right? And I'm going to grab all this code out, and I'm going to make this into like a thing that actually just kind of understands its state and doesn't have to have so much stringiness to it, right? So like I'm going to just do something like update fade. I don't know, something like that at the moment. Let's just say that. And then what update fade will do is it's just going to take a look, right, at what the state of this thing actually was. And so we've got a couple states already, right? Our first state would be like Win32 fade fading in, Win32 fade showing, or like waiting for show. Then there'd be Win32 fade inactive, basically. Win32 fade, I guess in this case we would also have fading in, waiting for show, inactive, and then we would also have like fading out, right? And each of these would be its own like thing. Yeah. So if I have a Win32 fade window, and this is the window, I don't know, we'll call it fader. In fact, we might just call it a Win32 fader. Something like that. Then I'm just going to go ahead and implement this, this thing in its entirety. So what we've got here is all of this code that we had before, right? Like all this stuff. Hopefully we can kind of make this a little bit more explicit and just kind of transform it into something a little more reasonable. So here's all that code, right? And I'm going to parcel it out into something hopefully a little bit more reasonable, right? So we start with this, and let's see what we've got. So if we're fading in, then really what we want to do is like do something like whatever the DT is, right? We're gonna fade that in. And so if we're fading out, we're just going to subtract that, right? And if the fade alpha goes below 0, 0, that's like our edge condition, our transition condition, right? And so at that point, when we go below 0, we're going to switch to a different state. We're going to say like, okay, we've got, if we're fading out, that would just give us Win32 fade, waiting for close or something, I guess, which would be our final state. Yeah? Okay. All right. So, when we're inactive, that actually doesn't have to do anything. Note, nothing to do, because we're just not doing anything. When we're in waiting for close, I think that's also nothing to do. That's just a state that we don't really care about, right? It's saying that like we're just kind of waiting for someone to shut us down. When we're waiting for show, that is just as soon as we do that the first time, we're only going to wait one time through the message loop. So really all we do in that case is immediately transition to the inactive state. And then for fading in, we're just going to do this. Right? Okay, so I think that's our complete state transition, if you will. So now we just have to actually do whatever it is that we needed to do, right? So when we do our plus equals dt, we would essentially say like, okay, whatever the actual, in fact, I guess this might be like this. So if it's greater than or equal to 1.0, what we would do is we would set the fade alpha equal to 1.0, and we'd transition to our waiting for show state. Once we get to our waiting for show state, that's where we need to actually do this whole nonsense, right? So when we go to our waiting for show state, this is what we actually want to do. Otherwise, we're going to just do the update. Same with this guy, I think. We want to do something like this. Where when we get down to 0, we've got to do whatever the thing is we're going to do. So we do like our set fade alpha with 0, for example, and then we would go ahead and and do our wait for close. And I think, is there anything else that happened in here? The quit on fade thing. So that set fade alpha, show window, hide, that whole situation. So I think none of that actually needs to occur just yet. So I'm going to get rid of these guys. All right, so there's our little state diagram. Like I said, we haven't really super covered finite state machines here. So this is kind of a little cursory introduction. I mean, basically what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of code that was based on several different variables and then making explicit the different modes, right? And each mode gets a name, and then we have transitions between the modes, right? And so that's really all I was doing, and we'll cover those maybe a little bit more in detail later. But for now, you can kind of see what that transformation looked like. And that's just to make the code a little more explicit so it's not so hard to figure out what gets called when. So we'll tune that and debug that in a minute here, but now I just have to wire it up. But there's one more thing I want to do, and that is right here. So when we do our fade in, I feel like we may also want to do one more thing, which would be maybe like, yeah, like instead of fading in, we might do something like, you know, fading, you know, fading like game or something. I don't know. We might want to fade the game to black, and we might want to do that the same way. It seems better to make the game fade itself out to black, but I'm just going to throw this in here anyway, because why not, right? So I'm going to have fading game in here, and what fading game would do is it would do this exact same thing. It would say like, okay, if it's greater than 1.0, I want to do the thing here, but instead of this stuff, what I want to do is get rid of the game window, right? This is all game window stuff, right? I want to get rid of the game window so it hides it at that point. And then I want to switch us to fading out, which will start, so we'll go to black, we'll get rid of the game window, then we'll come back from black to show the desktop, right? That was all that I was thinking there. So yeah, that seems reasonable to me. So yeah, game window, game window, game window, game window, game window. So you'd pass the game window into this thing like this probably. So in here I just say like begin fade in, and this would be like begin fade out, something like that. And this would be like, you know, init fader. Right? That sort of thing. And so when we go to do begin fade in, we would just say, all right, our state is going to be win32 fading in. Our, you know, our fade alpha is going to be 0, 0 at the start. And then the fader, our fader state for this is going to be fading game. Probably name these states a little bit better in a second here once we see them all. And the alpha is going to be, again, 0, 0. And that would be pretty much all there would be to it, I would think. Our init fader is just going to take that construction code, which I kind of already nicely segregated there. I'm going to go ahead and make that this part right here. And I'm also going to go ahead and move this guy up because he's referenced by these guys, so we're just going to put him in up there as a utility. All right. So if we assume that that's going to work at all, which we don't know that it will, let's go ahead and make this happen here. Yeah. There we go. Hopefully that's all good. This all looks fine. Fade window, you know, hwin fade window is just fader window. Could just replace fade window with fader window. Like that. And now when I compile, we should have most of our stuff working okay, but there should be some weird things here. Still, let's get rid of that. Okay. So yeah. Couple more things that need to happen now in the main loop, I think is about it. So we've got to do our fader alpha here. So fade alpha is going to be fader alpha, like, oops, not that way. Try that one more time. So there we go. Yep. Nope. Nope. Yep. 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 Nope. Nope, yep. All right. Good deal. Okay. So that's all good. And I think now we should be able to do this. So now what we would do is we would say out here, begin fade out, and we would do, I guess those are bad names. Begin fade out. I'm going to call this begin fade to game, begin fade to desktop. So this is going to be begin fade to desktop, and this is going to take our fader there, and this stuff's all going to go away, right? That's all good. And then what I'm going to do up here when we update this guy, so where we were doing it before, after we do our target seconds for frame and all that stuff, what I'm going to do is ahead here is say, okay, update fade. We're going to update the fader. And what that's going to do, I'm going to have that, that return what the new state is, if that makes sense. Like what the state that it transitioned to was, like that. So it's basically going to say like, oh yeah, you know, like I'm going to return fader state like so. I might also go ahead and do a little assertion here. So, and so when I do this, what I'm trying to do now is just say like, okay, once I do my update fade, if I needed to take an action based on that, I will take that action. So for example, for now I'll just do, the only one I actually care about is waiting for close. So if this thing says that I need to close, then I'm going to say like, okay, global running is going to get killed here when the fade thing is finished. But that's the only actual state I care about at the moment. And so I think that's all I really need to do. Now I just need to initialize our windows properly, and that's a real simple matter of just saying like, here's our Win32 fader, and what I'm going to do here is just do initialize fader, and that needs to take our instance. But that's it, and now we're good. So hey man, I probably got some bugs in there, it's true. Oops, and I got to pass the game window there. But that's at least structurally a little more sound now. And so I can actually like relate to it a little bit more and hopefully debug it more. So hey, the fade out worked first time. That's pretty handy. But now we got to work on that fade back to the desktop, right? So yeah, first problem is Alt F4 kind of immediately killed our window. That's not very reassuring. And so let's take a look at why that actually happened there. Oh, I forgot. That actually is supposed to immediately kill our window. It's escape that actually exits the game now. So let's try that and see if that does anything. That does absolutely nothing. Nothing, 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 right? And it doing absolutely nothing is not really what I wanted. If I'd wanted it to do nothing, I would have, well, I don't know why I would have done that. All right, so we've got, oh, well, that would do it. I think we can see why that's the case. So begin fade to desktop, this quit requested will presumably stay set to true, and it'll keep resetting over and over again. It'll keep recalling begin fade to desktop over and over again, resetting our alpha value. So what we actually want to do is say, okay, if the fader state, you know, if we haven't started one of these yet, right, then we would want to do that. So it's only if the fader state is inactive that we actually probably want to let that happen. So that's a bit of a hacky way to do it. We should probably make the transition a little more explicit there. But for now, that should be fine. There's that darn window again. So we also have a problem where we're not hiding that guy. So let's take a look at that bug first. So why aren't we hiding that guy? Let's see. Well, when we set the window, set fader alpha, when we fade in, that's supposed to set to 0. So that's just a mess up, isn't it? Oh, no, it's not a mess up. That's supposed to happen here where we do waiting for show. It's supposed to happen here, right? That's when we're supposed to set that 0 to clear out the window. Yeah, to avoid the glitch, right? So now we don't have that window in the Alt-Tab hierarchy, which is what we want. That's good. And now if I hit escape, there's our fade out. And hey, there's our fade back to the desktop. So now we're actually working properly. Fade out, run the game, and we can make that fade in if we wanted to, right? We could do that in any number of ways, I suppose. Yeah, that's all good. And then escape, fades out the game, fades back in the desktop. And hopefully, Miblo, that is what you wanted. That's about it. There's not a whole lot to say about that, other than hopefully we did what Miblo wanted. And now you know how to fade the desktop in and out. Happy birthday. And again, a big thank you to Martin's Mosaico, who reminded me of something that I ostensibly taught on the stream earlier, but I guess I didn't teach it very well because I myself didn't remember it. What are you going to do? Anyway, let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. In case you have any questions about what you just saw, we can go ahead and answer them now. Miblo says, Casey, you need one more state to wait for alpha-enabled window to show because you might have the same bug when you fade to desktop. Do you think that's true? Because I didn't think that would really be the case, and I'll explain to you why. I also don't see it happen, so I'm assuming I'm right, but I don't really know. So let me explain to you why I didn't think I would have that bug, and here's the reason, right? So set layered window goes through the alpha compositing phase, and as soon as you call it, I believe it goes into the alpha compositing channel of windows, which is synced properly and does its thing. So my assumption is in here, when you go from inactive to fading game, right? As soon as we call SW high, as soon as we call set fade alpha, that layered window is active right then. It's not going through this path, which goes through the message pump. Because set layered window is actually the call that updates the window, whereas show window is actually just a call that kicks off the whole message loop thing. So my assumption is there actually is no bug between these two, because this doesn't go through the same path, right? They're different ways of working. That's my assumption. Again, like I said, I don't know. So until I see a bug, I'm going to assume that that's true. But if somebody encounters it doing that, please let me know, and we can try and reproduce it. But that's my assumption. Oh, that wasn't Miblo. That was M1EL. Sorry. Didn't mean Miblo. Steel Golem, your fading setup seems overcomplicated to me. Why not just take a screenshot, blit that to the back buffer, and fade that? What platforms wouldn't that work for? So there's a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. One is you don't know if you can reliably get a copy of the back buffer. For example, suppose that someone is playing an HDCP protected movie and has paused it in the background. Well, you can't get a copy of that from the back buffer because Windows will prevent you from getting a copy of that from the back buffer. And so when you try to fade out, what you'll actually get is in the instant where you transition from the desktop to your buffer, you'll just get garbage where that window was, right? Number two, what if there was an alpha overlay, right? There might be a YUV composite overlay that someone was using on the graphics card. This is like an older thing that was often done, but still, might be happening to this day for all you know, where there's a color key, and the color key is getting replaced by the graphics card with a YUV overlay. That used to happen all the time. That wouldn't capture properly, and again, you'd get that glitch, right? You get that glitch on the transition. Next one. And there's like tons of reasons you don't want to do it. So I'm just listing as many as I can think of. So the next one reason you don't want to do it that way is because you don't know what the resolution of the desktop is, right? So what you'd have to do first is you'd have to ask what the resolution of the desktop is, because if you actually just create a back buffer that's the resolution that you want to run the game at, right? And you either are going to change the display resolution to your game, or you're going to just you're going to do stretch blit to put it up there, or you've got the OpenGL is going to go full screen. Who knows what happens, right? If your resolution doesn't match the desktop resolution, then on that part where you're about to fade out, everything changes. You get it all goes crunky, because like let's say the resolution of your game is 1080 by 1280 by 1024 or something like that, right? And the desktop resolution was 2400 by whatever, 2440 or by whatever. The screen's gonna first down res and then fade out, right? And so in order to combat that, you would have to do something where you first created a back buffer that was the resolution of the desktop, copied to that, faded out in that, closed that down, created a back buffer for your game, which was the game's resolution, bring that up, right? And so now who's more overcomplicated? All of a sudden, this thing that was like less complicated than just having this window is actually way more complicated and has way more things that can go wrong, right? So really, like, that's just a really bad idea. And if you can get away without doing that, I don't think you want to, because doing the fade this way goes entirely through Windows Composite Engine. And so as long as Windows is able to composite, we're good, right? That's what I would say. Why are you using a second window for the fade in instead of just fading in the main window? Very glad you asked that question. That is what I would have done a couple months ago. However, I was actually playing recently with layered windows and transparency, and what I found was that if you set the layered window flag on your window, your performance goes to, I won't say the word on the stream because this is for children as well. We're trying to keep this safe for children. But point being, you don't get very good performance. Setting the layered flag actually reduces your performance dramatically. And I don't know if this is necessarily true for StretchBlit, which is what we're using now, but it is definitely true for OpenGL, which is what we will use eventually, right? And so you absolutely, positively, 100% in no way ever, 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 ever want to set the layered window flag if you are trying to do high performance graphics. It just doesn't work. It's not the fast path for OpenGL, so there's just problems in the driver, I guess, where whatever it has to negotiate with Windows just isn't right. So yeah, I would love to actually do it that way. That would be way more sensical, but it doesn't work in Windows. It's unreliable in terms of performance. Miblo, wow, thank you for such a comprehensive answer to my question. That's exactly what I wanted. Another small one, would it be possible to make bits of the window transparent, e.g. for the situation where some monster, or Monstar, as you said, has torn a hole in the game window, revealing this, I believe? Unfortunately, no. It is not possible for the reason I just said, which is to say that technically you could totally do that with the layered window things. But performance-wise, you can't. Because for some reason, you get really bad behavior when you go through that layered window path. Like, I tested this myself, and literally just setting the flag, even if you did not use it, meaning even if you were still at full opacity, so there was no actual transparency occurring, just setting the flag reduced OpenGL performance dramatically. Like, dramatically. A very measurable number of milliseconds. And again, maybe that's fixed in, Windows 10 or something, so maybe you could do it on certain Microsoft platforms, but definitely on the platform, on the machine that I was even testing on. I didn't have to go test it on like hundreds of machines to find it. My dev machine, it didn't work. Mr. Forza mentioned, suppose you're Microsoft, but instead of wanting all the money in the world, you just want to make a living selling your operating system. Do you think you could do that while providing a good way for users of your platform to debug the code that uses your API? Yes, I strongly suspect that you could, because I'll be honest, I really don't think there would be much difference to Microsoft's actual business model if they just flat out ship the source code to everything but the kernel level stuff, Like shipping the source code to user 32 would not change Microsoft sales at all. At all. At all. In fact, it might increase them because people could debug it better and security researchers could find bugs faster and help patch the OS and all the bugs in it, So I think they absolutely could. Because no one is going to step through kernel code anyway unless you're really, really hardcore and have a kernel debugger set up, which very, very few people do. So you don't need to ship the source code to all the other stuff, but you could absolutely ship the source code to the higher level stuff. And if there's certain parts of it that you don't want to ship, don't ship those parts. But like Microsoft already ships symbol server, which has like the symbols for like stack traces, so you do know where in the code you are. You just don't get any actual source. You just only can see the like assembly, right? I think they should just ship the source of that. Just forget it. Just ship the source, and then people could just step through it. I don't think it would affect their business model at all. If anything, I think it would improve it. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? Insofar as, can you not unset the layered window flag after doing the fade? So do not 100% quote me on this, but I am 99.99999% positive I tried exactly that, and the answer is no. If you, like, what you might be able to do, and I don't know because I don't think I tried this, but what you might be able to do is unset the layered window flag, destroy the OpenGL context, and create a new OpenGL context, or something like that. Or only create the OpenGL context after you unset the layered window flag or something. That might work, because it might be that it's when you create the OpenGL context that it does it. I don't know, right? I don't know. But simply unsetting the flag is not sufficient, right? So yeah. So if this is something you really cared about a lot, right? You could go do some more testing. I did not test it extensively. I did not like exhaustively sit down and see, can I make this work, right? I was just like, oh, whoa, didn't know that one. Okay, I won't set this anymore, because it wasn't like critical what I was doing. But if you were like, no, I've got to make the thing that does this, then you might be able to do something like, oh, I do some rendering, and it's like slower and less efficient when I do the transparent stuff, but then as soon as I'm untransparent, I do this other stuff. I like shut down the context, create a new context, whatever. Like, you might be able to make something work. I don't know. But the trivial case of just unsetting the flag, I'm pretty much positive I tried that, and no, it doesn't help. If all you do is unset the flag, that doesn't restore the performance. Steel Golem, wait, why can I alt print screen to capture HDCP with Windows, but I can't take a screen cap manually? I have lots of screenshots of my PS3 through the player via print screen. So it depends entirely on what the, like, I guess what I should say is what the content protections actually are, is my understanding. So for example, I don't really know, what, like, I don't know the details of the HDCP spec, if that makes sense, and what you are and are not allowed to do. All I know is that it's definitely possible for it to be prevented, for it to be prohibited, for you to capture video. It's like full on, not even like, you're not even allowed to do it, right? So I don't know what the circumstances are where that happens, but it definitely does happen. And the PS3 doesn't have HDCP, by the way, by default, right? The PS3 will only send out HDCP, as far as I know. It only sends out HDCP if you're playing actual HDCP media. I don't think it's not going to turn on the protected flag if you're just streaming a game, as far as I know. So I would say, are you absolutely sure that you actually used something with HDCP, actually tried to capture like an actual frame of a movie or something that was HDCP protected, and did it have like no screenshotting as the thing? Blau238, this detour was all about startup and shutdown fades, but how would you implement fading in between in-game scenes? This shouldn't involve the Windows API, correct? Yeah, so once we're in our game, so if we're only talking about fading between our stuff, that we just can do in our own renderer, right? So that's nice because we don't have to deal with, we don't care about Windows at all. So fading in and out to black is really simple. That's just a case of modulating to 0. And if you see, we've actually already got, where's our Emacs window? There it is. We've actually already got that in here, I believe, in Handmade optimized.cpp. So when we do draw rectangle quickly, I think we've got it. Yeah, so you see we've got this color modulation happening here. So if you look at Handmade render group and who calls this, you can see that when we do this, there's an entry color parameter right there, right? And what that does, right, is it modulates the bitmap that we're drawing, whatever that texture is, it modulates it by a particular color. So if you wanted to fade something to black, it'd be really pretty easy to do. For example, inside our cutscene that was happening here, we could do, and I'll just sketch it out for you. If you want to do something where you said, like, okay, this particular layered scene is going to have a thing where it like fades, from black or something, right? I don't even know. So we just have a thing that's like fades from black. That's the thing that you set. Then you could do something, and in fact, I could even do something like fade in, T fade in. I don't know, right? Then what you could do is when we create these layered scenes, right, you can kind of see all the layered scenes happening here. Then on like that first shot, if we wanted that to fade in from black, we just say like, okay, 10% of the way in, I want the fade to have been completed, right? And everyone else doesn't have it set to anything. Then what we do is when we do render cutscene at a time, we go through the shots, we figure out whether we've got a shot. We said we're going to render a particular layered scene. Off we come, right? Inside render layered scene, we have T normal, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, what's the alpha value for this, right? What's the alpha value for the global thing, right? Or I shouldn't say alpha, but the global fade value, right? The whole shot. Whatever that shot fade is, so, scene fade value. So scene fade value is going to by default be 1, which means that you're going to see, the scene's just full bright. But what we're going to do is say, okay, if T normal is less than whatever the scene says its T fade in is, whatever that is, if that's the case, then we're going to set the scene fade value equal to the map, a smooth 0 to 1 based on that, whatever that time period is, right? And we already did that. We already know exactly how to do this, right? We did it down here where we do right here, right? This function right here, clamp 0, 1 map to range, saying between these two, I have a value that lies between these other two values. I want you to give me a number from 0 to 1 that tells me how far through there I actually am, right? So I go in here and I say, okay, give me that. We know it comes between 0 and whatever the fade in value is, and I've got my T normal value, and so I want you to map that out into my fade value. Now I've just got a color, right? And that color can just be the scene fade value every time. Now remember, I'm not setting the alpha here. This is not an alpha fade. I'm not making it transparent. What I'm doing is I'm making it black, right? I'm starting it at black because if I multiply every color by 0, R, G, and B by 0, I get black. If I multiply them by less than 0, right, I get, a fade to black. So 1 will give me the color, 0 gives me black, anywhere in between there lets me fade to that black, right? So now all I have to do is every time I render a layer, I just give it that color, right? So after we get the bitmap out, we do whatever the thing is we're doing here. Then at the end, I just pass that color, and I say, that's the color I want you to use for the bitmap, right? So now, when we do it, we fade out, we go to black, and then we fade back in, right? And that's it. And now we can control that fade value by using that 0 to 1. Like maybe you want to fade in a little slower. Maybe you want it, let's say I want a really slow fade instead of that 0.1 value that I stuck in there just arbitrarily, right? I could make it take half, 10 seconds to fade in if I wanted to. And now we fade out, and then we slowly fade back in again, right? And that's how that goes. Now, there's a problem with that, I think. I have to think about it, which is that it's in the wrong alpha space. So what we probably need to do, like if you wanted to be correct about that, is we need to make sure that alpha is gamma corrected alpha. I think we're kind of out of time, so I really don't want to talk about that right now, but it's going to be ramped wrong. So really what has to happen with that scene fade value is you'd have to go like, and I don't really remember where this was. It's probably in math. I don't know. I don't know where that is. No recollection whatsoever. Just none. Yeah, I just don't know. Let me double check that I'm actually right. Yeah, I mean, see, that just gets straight up used, right? So it's going to be like the wrong. It's going to modulate. It's modulating in linear space, I believe. Modulate by incoming color. Go from sRGB to linear brightness space. Oh, weird. No, we modulate the textures beforehand. Whoa. That seems really wrong to me. So I guess I was right. We would have put in the gamma, but that's only because I think we did this wrong. Would you agree with that assessment? Like, I feel like that's just wrong. Oh, but that's the dest that's just being loaded out. So never mind. Where do we do that? That's the dest that I was looking at there. So where does this happen? Where does this happen? When we do the mul PS, what are those texels in? When we load those out. Unpacked by linear samples. So these all get unpacked. SRLI, EPI 32, blah, 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 original dest. Here we go. Convert texture from 0 to 25 sRGB to linear. So they're in linear. So I feel like that should be okay. I feel like that should be okay. I have to think about that. Because if they're in linear and we're multiplying by linear, that feels like that should work. So I'm not really sure. We'll have to save that, because you notice what happened when I did that over a slow time period like that, right? It ramps up in like a very non-linear way to me. At least that's what it looked like to me. And so that looks more like the gamma curve was not being applied correctly in some way that I am not doing. Like, so something is not right, right? Something's not right. So that's something to look at. That might be something good to look at tomorrow. But anyway, there you go. And we're out of time. So that's it. So you're just going to have to deal with the fact that we are out of time. Just straight up out of time. Just like out of it. All right. So that's it. I will wrap it up for today. And I'm going to say in here to do, Casey, why does this fade seem to be wrong? It appears non-linear, but if it is in linear brightness, shouldn't it appear linear? And maybe that's just we're not understanding it properly, or I don't know what, but I would like to know what's going on there because I don't really understand. So we'll leave it at that. We'll close it down. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you, as always. If you would like to follow along with the source code, you can always do that by pre-ordering the game, handmadehero.org. This little handy-dandy pre-order button, it comes with the source code so that you can download it and follow along with everything I do. And it comes with the art pack, too, so if you can play around with those cutscenes just like I am. Maybe you can figure out why the fade is wrong before I do. It's a little challenge for you. We can go to other places too. The forum site, place to get your questions answered, ask questions about the series, all sorts of good stuff like that. There's an annotated episode guide up there you should definitely check out. There's a Patreon page. If you want to support the video series, you can pledge to that. Very much appreciated. We also have a tweet bot that tweets the schedule at you. And that tweet bot will tell you that we are off tomorrow. We are off tomorrow because it is the Molly Rocket holiday party, quote unquote. But we will be back on Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I will see you guys then, when maybe we will look at the alpha problem and see why that fade was not linear. Who knows? Maybe we'll figure it out. Or maybe we'll do something else. Who knows? Only one way to find out, and that's to come back. Love to see you. Until then, have a good time programming, and I'll see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.